Dan's Larch. Dan's new to bonsai, is that right?
That's right, pretty much.
And he's very sensibly bought himself a really nice piece of Willowbog raw material. Now before I say much about this, I want to know how much you've talked to the club's, are you the chairman? Yeah.
Actually, I am, yeah.
Yeah, the club's chairman. Presumably the club chairman advised you about this piece of material.
Yes, yes.
He did indeed. Yeah. And so perhaps Mr. Young would help us to talk about, because I'm not going to say, oh no, you definitely want to do this, or you can't possibly do that, if Mr. Young's already said, well, actually I think you should do this. What did you talk about?
What I did say was that I liked the tree. The reason why we held on to it here after your last visit was because a couple of us were thinking about it. I decided not to in the end because I'd rather have a bark with more mature bark on it for myself personally. But I liked the movement. I liked the twin trunk. There's a few issues in there with the levels of the two trunks, because your lighter trunk line is actually the same height as the what's the heavier one, could actually be short, and would like to have it tilted over. So we looked at that, and we looked at the other one out there as well, and sort of between the two, Stan preferred that himself.
The important thing from my point of view is that you actually said there that you like the twin trunk element of it, and presumably you did also, because I think we could find quite a lot of people who've been doing bonsai, and I'm not saying they would be wrong, who would say that the arrangement of the two trunks is awkward, in the sense that there's a really big gap between the two trunks, and the shape of the gap. Very often in bonsai, what's more important than the actual bit of the tree itself is the shape of the space that is created between that bit of the tree and another bit of the tree, whether we're talking about trunks or whether we're talking about branches and foliage. Very often the actual shape, because the eye will often see the shape before it sees the shape of the branch. A lot of people would find perhaps some difficulties with that arrangement. For me, actually it makes the tree the interesting tree that it is. Certainly, I collected this tree myself from the wild, and when I collect a tree like this, I might immediately think, well, as a bonsai, it can either be one or other of these two trunks, and not both. So I might well have, when I collected it, cut that off there, or I might well have cut that off there, and just decided that whoever bought it would be forced into going with a single trunk. But I didn't. I saw this tree and I thought, well, no, even though it's a fairly unconventional arrangement of the two trunks, there's just something about it that's quite interesting and is worth keeping. As Ian said, there's certainly issues about the fact that you've got a big flat area here at the top of the tree, all at the same level, and that certainly needs to be changed. Perhaps the first thing to say is that you're a complete beginner to bonsai, and even if you weren't, to achieve a full amount of work on this tree today will be extremely difficult, because there's an awful lot of work to do on this tree. Also, actually, it would be not a good idea to do all the work on this tree today. It's just not it's not a good way to do bonsai, and to force too much to be done to a tree in one session. It's a very, very healthy tree. I hope you'll agree that there's absolutely no problem with the tree. When several times yesterday I said we've got a checklist of things we look about, how well we know the tree. Well, you don't know the tree well, but I do. We can tell how vigorous it is, and so on and so forth. So pretty much all those we can tick those off, and we can say that actually this tree is well enough for us to do quite a bit of work. But for instance, the final shaping of this tree, I mean not final in the sense that it's going to happen when it's near the end of being a bonsai. I meant the final shaping, the final part of the initial shaping, cannot be done without wire, in my opinion. And it's a very bad time to try and wire a larch. Not the worst time, perhaps the worst time is when everything's opening out, because then it's all very vulnerable to being knocked off, still very thing. But it's not a good time. You can't even see what you're doing. And yet, and of course, because we have the advantage of the fact that larch is a deciduous conifer, then we have the advantage of being able to wire it when it has no leaves on. And that's, believe you me, that is way, way, way more easily done than done with the needles, the leaves on. So we can still do lots and lots today. As Ian said, we need to sort out what we do about the two heights being the same. The most conventional approach to producing a twin trunk bonsai would be to have the heavier trunk, the taller tree. That would make sense most of the time. Not always though. One of the things we have to deal with the heavier trunk is the fact that it's been a much taller tree that I cut back. So we have to deal with that in some way. So that means deadwood. That needs to be sorted out. And actually, the deadwood can be a really important part of this tree. In fact, it certainly will be an important part of this tree, even though, because it's a little bit towards the back, and we haven't talked about front and back, but it will be towards the back of the tree. We're not going to see the most of it, but that doesn't mean to say we don't still need to make a really good job of this. And actually this would be quite a good thing, the deadwood aspect of this would be quite a good thing to deal with in October with the school and with the workshop after the school, where I do intend to focus on deadwood as part of as the main focus of the day. So the fact that this is clearly going to be seen as part of our design to have been a bigger trunk that has been knocked back, it's possible that we might end up with this not being the tallest of the two elements of the thing, because the story this bonsai would tell would be of a big tree that has been knocked back by the elements, and the smaller trunk as a consequence has gained height. That might not be the case. We might still, we've got 2 or 3 branches on here that we're going to use or might use. We could still quite easily make this the tallest thing, if that's going to look best when we start to design the tree. There's some very obvious places where the smaller trunk could be cut back to. What we need to be careful about doing there though is we have a lot of good features actually about both trunks really. This appears a little bit straight from here, and that's a little bit straight there, but actually there's a lot of nice movement in this secondary trunk, and you would need to be really sure what we're doing before deciding that we could cut this tree off here, because we would be losing quite a nice part of movement there. However, when we talk about the design of an out-and-out piece of raw material, we very rarely going to have everything in place that allows us to do exactly what would be the perfect thing to do. We're going to have to make some compromises one way and another. So we might say, well, we like that bit of movement there, but you know, it's always going to look funny making the two heights exactly the same. We need an image that is not big and flat. We need an image which is narrow at the top and actually gets a bit smaller. That's partly at least just to be able to keep every branch on the tree healthy, because if you know, we have to design a bonsai that is going to last, that is going to be, you know, you're a young man. You're a young man.
I'm away now.
Sorry. You're a young man, hopefully with a whole lifetime of bonsai ahead of you. We need to design you a tree that you're still going to look really good when you're my age. And so it's no good putting in features of this tree which are only going to last 5 or 10 years before they begin to get unhappy because of the way they're done. The two teachers I've had over the years, Marco Invernizzi and Mark Nolanders, between them they've taught to me the value of creating from a piece of raw material a bonsai that has a real future ahead of it. It doesn't just look magnificent today because of the way we wired and bent all the branches into place, but those branches are placed in such a way that you can easily keep them healthy and strong and an important part of the design of the tree over a 5, 10, 20, 30, 50, 100, because you're going to be passing it on to your offspring period ahead of you. So it's quite important to think in terms of positioning branches and enabling light to always get into all of the branches is part of the actual design process of the tree. And that's one of the reasons why it's quite difficult to have a bonsai with a big flat top to it. Why would that be a problem with a bonsai when it might not be a problem with a 60-foot tree? Simply because if you've got 60 foot of height to work with as a tree, I know it's a funny way of putting it, then there's light coming in from all the ways, coming down and it's coming in from the sides because you've got 60 foot. We haven't got 30 inches here, so if this is on a bench with this big flat top to it, only 30 inches above the bench, the capacity of the availability of light coming into the side is quite reduced. So that's why it can be very rare to end up with a good viable design where there is not quite a lot of differentiation in height between the branches. We'll just quickly talk about the front of this tree in terms of making a bonsai from it. Very often the best approach with a lot of things we do with bonsai is to start off looking at where we cannot use something. So one of the problems with this view as the front of the tree is that everything is going away from the viewer. Okay, so we could fiddle around a bit with inclination and things. When you change inclination, you've always got to look at the roots and see how the inclination is going to actually affect the roots. You don't want, if all your viable roots, suppose all the viable roots are here, or the vast bulk of them are there, and we say, well, actually the best way to style this tree is to incline it like that. What is the effect on those roots? They're going to be out in the air because our pot has to be level, our pot has to be here. So actually those roots would have to end up being up in the air. Now we might be able to make an interesting Deadwood feature of the roots, but it's no good if all our viable roots are all on the end of the bit that we want poking up in the air. So you need, if you change inclination, you need to think about how that's going to affect the root base. So in here, it's not a good way to have the front. This, moving around a bit more, yet again, everything moving away from you. The one thing that actually would help this as a front, and this is something to bear in mind that was stressed very strongly with the work we did over the years with Mark Newlanders, who's extremely good at designing trees. One of the good things we learned from Mark is that if you've already got all of your branches at the front of your tree, and with raw material, it's very rare that the branches are nice little short branches somebody's been preparing for a tree that's going to be a bonsai. It is, actually, if you buy it from Japan, almost certainly that's what we're going to buy. But when you collect trees in the wild, they've almost always got much longer branches than we want to use in bonsai. And if all your long branches, all the branches you've got, they're already in front of the tree and they're too long, it's very difficult to take them anywhere to get them out of the way, if you see what I mean. You've either just got to cut them really short, which means that you end up cutting loads of branches back, or you try to snake them in with lots of artificial twists to bring them more compact. Now, if your branches are all at the back of the tree, it's much easier to bring a long branch from the back of the tree round, and it appeared to be quite short because you brought it round from the back of the tree to use it. Fortunately, because the person who supplied this material has done some pruning on it, we have branches at the front of the tree, it's true, but they're already quite short, compact branches. And some of these we probably won't need anyway. So the one advantage of this would be that most of the branches are at the back, and they could be brought round to the front, but nothing else, frankly, goes with this as being a good front. The surface roots we've got are clearly here, and we've virtually got no surface roots, just this rather large ugly root here, and the trunk is not particularly attractive. We don't even see so much of the nice movement in the trunks, particularly this trunk, as you can see from the other side. This is an impossible front here. Again, the root base is not so good. A main feature of the tree, this trunk here, is coming directly towards the viewer, so it's impossible to use without chopping that off and just going with a single trunk, which I don't think we want to do. So I started off with thinking of this as the front of the tree. Excuse me. You know, such surface roots that we've got are not bad from here. Again, collected with Yamadori material, you're going to be extraordinarily lucky if you're going to have any significantly good nabari, because trees in the sorts of places we collect them to be good bonsai material tend not to grow good nabaris. But this is not bad. You know, from where we're looking at this, we've got a reasonable spread of roots here. This is a bit big to be where it is, and it may be possible to eliminate that root. We will never know that really until we have a good look at the roots. Probably not next spring. We talked about that yesterday. Probably the spring after we will be able to have a look at the roots of this tree properly for the first time. If we find that there's no roots at all to speak of on the end of here, we might decide to cut it off altogether. We might decide to make a total deadwood feature that somehow might link in with some other deadwood features. Or if we find that actually there's a lot of important roots on here, we can still maybe make this more attractive by actually creating an area of deadwood just on the top of the root. In the way that we would have a shari on the trunk, we can have a sort of a shari on the top of this. And your eye then looks at the interest created in that little piece of deadwood and fails to notice that otherwise it was just a big fat ugly root. So there's lots of ways we can improve that if we can't simply eliminate it altogether. But anyway, what I think we'll do today is start your way cleaning out some of these branches. So little dead twigs can all be just pruned away. So even if we end up cutting this branch off and don't use it, it's quite a good exercise for you to spend just a little bit of time going through the branch and cutting anything away that's already dead or anything that's too close to the trunk. Remember, the same things apply to this as apply to almost all our bonsai. We do not want lots of small growth this close to the trunk, because it wouldn't be there naturally in an old tree. It would have died back. So we want to be able to see the trunk. We want to be able to see the way the main branches emerge from the tree. There's a lot of little bits and pieces in there, and I'm pretty certain either Ian or me will be able to just keep an eye on you and get you cutting away. But things like this, you know, like the buds on the maple yesterday, these want taken away even when they're still buds. These can all these little twiddly bits here, we never want to use these as branches, because for this to be a branch it needs to be as fat as that, and we've got plenty of branches to work with actually. And then we can look at maybe whether we're going to change the inclination a little bit to make this trunk taller and bring that trunk down. Whether we bring that trunk down, possibly with some guy wiring, it's possible to move that branch quite a bit if we wanted to do. We don't want to be careful not to make this any more level, I don't think. But quite a lot to look at, but quite a lot you can do. There's some dead branches in here. You could even start to make one or two gins. Again, it's quite a useful exercise to make a gin when you've not done it before. Even if I then say we don't want a gin there and just cut it off, it doesn't matter. You've had the experience of actually physically the technique of creating a gin. So I think that's enough on that tree. Lots of work to do. Even on a big tree like this, we could almost count how few branches we've actually got. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But actually, if this was a 100-foot tree in the wild, it would have 1,000 branches. So we need to trick the viewer into thinking that there's a load more branches here than there really are. So here our one branch, we make it look like loads of branches. Well, as many branches as we can. So to do that, one thing we need to do is to bring it down. Well, that helps the aged look anyway, but the more we bring it down, the more we make space above to bring in branches like that. Because we want branches to be one above the other, but set back. We don't want them like that, because the one underneath is never going to get enough light. So we want the second and third branches to be either a little bit to one side and back, or if they're going to be right above this one, they've got to be here, so that the outside of these branches don't cover what's underneath. So this will come down with either with guy wires or with a bit of heavy wire. This will be brought round like that. This can come down a bit more, but then go up. So that's more or less the position. And funnily enough, although this is incredibly difficult to do, well, I think it is anyway, I've been taught by I think the best teacher I could ever have had, also probably the best wirer of bonsai that I've ever seen, and he wants people to learn to hold the branch in the position it's going to be when the wire is on, whilst you're actually putting the wire on. Now that's a different approach to what we've always done. We've always put the wire on and then bent the branch. The problem with that is that actually you put the wire on, then you bend the branch, and the wire isn't actually where it needs to be to work best of all. If you start off, you have to start off with the wire on the branch, but then you hold the branch in place and then you put the wire on, and actually the wire holds it way better, because in the process of bending you tend to separate the branch away from where you've got the wire, and the wire needs to be in contact with the branch to support it. We can't, we're certainly going to start talking about wiring at the school in October.
Milk and sugar?
Just milk, please, John. So, but wiring is quite a difficult thing to pick up, and can't be learnt really quickly. So, I say, holding the branch how I think it's going to be, and that tells me that actually the perimeter of this pad, if you like, is going to be here. And because the branches I've got here don't really need to be any heavier, these are right at the outside of this branch, I'm not interested in making them too strong here, so I can actually shorten all of these. Now, if these were really weedy branches, really thin, I wouldn't have pruned them, because as we might have picked up yesterday, the more you leave the extension to grow, the more you're going to get girth at the base of the branch, but in the full knowledge you're going to have to cut it right back to there, because this long straight growth you've got is pretty much unusable as bonsai, as a bonsai branch, you know? Stan's larch that we did a lot of preliminary work on last time. It's grown really well. Don't seem to have had any problems with it at all. We had something guide here, did we? Was this bringing this up? I can't really remember what we talked about. Oh, bringing this up. Ah, yeah, I can see now. Yeah. Okay, so a little bit of a shame that we've had this happen here, but this is large. It grows like anything, and in a relatively short space of time, this is going to be hidden early. We always might see some kind of slight difference in trunk diameter between the two bits, but it's not going to be a big factor, I don't think. And in any case, the option in the future is maybe to do maybe even a little shari or something there to take your eye away from it. We've certainly got no branches here, so if we decided we want to make this a little bit more interesting, we're obviously going to have to do some deadwood work here on this big stub here. The apex of this part of the tree is going to be formed from this, so we need to treat it very, very carefully. We don't want to jeopardize it at all. We'd have to completely rethink the design if we were to do anything that jeopardized what is going to be the apex, and we wouldn't do anything here at all for some time. But I can imagine that if we have a nice, interesting piece of deadwood here from the stub, then at some point, this rather uninteresting little bit of, which is going to form the continuation of the trunk into the apex, there's no reason why we shouldn't have a little bit of a shari here, which would pick out deadwood here and deadwood here. So we'd have a little bit of a theme going there. Remember the larch that we looked at, that I brought across yesterday. We were looking at callousing on the larch. I mentioned that it had a prosthetic gin, a gin that wasn't there at all originally. I'm not saying we'd do that with this, but actually, possibly if we wanted a little shari here, we could actually insert a false gin if we thought it's a good idea. We might not, but you presumably were thinking of getting some wiring done today. My guess is that you're not going to get the whole tree wired. It would be quite interesting. Could we talk about changing the inclination? Can you remember? That way or that way? That way. That way. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can see that now. To be honest, by and large, our approach with all bonsai is to start at the bottom and work up, and we do that exactly the same with wiring. So you never start to put wire on up here and do some shaping. Why? Because the shaping of this branch cannot be done realistically before the shaping of this branch, and that can't be done before the braid shaping of this branch, which can't be done before the shaping of that branch. Because the critical thing with shaping bonsai of any kind almost is that there needs to be a distinct relationship between that branch and the one above it. This one does not want to be directly above it, shading all the light coming down from above. So we would want to see some subtle form of tiering to enable our branches not just to look beautiful, but actually to be long-term successful for the tree, getting adequate light, growing really well. So I'm certainly going to help you make some deadwood from this stub here today. Then if you get started on wiring, you're going to be wiring these two. And to be honest, if you got these two branches adequately wired, then the shaping that we did on these branches would probably be enough to help you go on and work through the rest of the tree and do the same sort of shaping. The Japanese approach, which we were very much guided through, particularly with Marco and Mark Newlanders at Willowbog, was to choose a branch which is the first branch of the tree, it's almost always the lowest branch, but it's the first branch in much more of a sense than just being the lowest branch, the first branch you come to. It's the first branch in the sense that it is the branch on the tree that is shaped first, and as a consequence, the way that that branch is shaped gives you a pattern for shaping everything. It's not that you make each branch identical, that's not what I'm saying, is that the particular way that you actually do the shaping, which is going to be characteristic to a larch, of course, in the same way it would be for a pine, is the kind of pattern, the theme that you use throughout the whole tree on the shaping process. So I think, you know, the important thing is we get this Deadwood dealt with today, particularly in the, you know, the theme of the school yesterday was Deadwood. So